All right, guys. So this we're ending our first Django week here. We're gonna be going over just a review to make sure we understand the core concepts from this week. So we're gonna go over the school roster challenge. We're gonna try to cover all of these items, but maybe we'll see how far we get. Definitely want to make sure we're comfortable setting up a new Django project. I want to understand how we kind of set up the view handlers and routing to make sure our Django project is wired up correctly. We'll also talk about creating templates and base templates if we have time, just to kind of have dry code. This might be sort of new information, as I know this is meant to be a review, but the idea of working with forms and adding data to our application. And then if we do have time, we'll try to sneak in an API. I don't have a good plan for APIs right now, but we'll see if we have time. We'll try to sneak in a random API that we get data from. But okay, so school roster is our challenge. I've cloned this down already, so we don't need to worry about that. But we want to, let's look at the README. That's probably a good place to start. This is gonna kind of revisit our old school interface project where we have staff and students. Our goal simply with this challenge was to get that data from CSV files and get it onto web pages so that we could kind of see the data on screen. All right, so we're going to go through creating a Django project. Let's do that. And, I feel like maybe I'm a little fuzzy on how to do this. Maybe I'm going to ask for some volunteers here. So Justice, I want to start a Django project here. Would you have any recommendations for what my first steps should be here?
Sure. So first thing you should do is probably set up a virtual environment.
Yep, absolutely correct. So just to talk more about virtual environments as I create them, the reason we do this, again, is because we want to have like a isolated bubble for each project that we create. It may seem kind of tedious to always have to create virtual environments and always download Django. But again, the purpose is that when you're creating actual projects, you want to kind of lock in versions for that particular project and not have it be affected by any other project or anything else on your system. So again, if I'm using version like 7.1 for my particular application, that version is always going to be used for my development unless I change it. But then if I have a new project elsewhere that I start that uses a different library version, like 8.0 of the same library, well, those projects should be independent. As in, I shouldn't be forced to use version 8.0 for all my projects on my computer. So a virtual environment gives you kind of like an isolated bubble that has its own version libraries or library versions in there. So to create a virtual environment, I can do python-m venv and then name my virtual environment. Again, this naming is up to you. My standard is .venv for that virtual environment folder. So I'll hit enter. Notice that a new venv folder gets created. That is my virtual environment that has some files in it. Again, I don't need to worry about what's in here, but just know that's where your virtual environment is living. This is taking a moment, and I'm not sure why it's taking this long. Maybe my computer took a nap, so I'm gonna kill that. Sorry, it should not take that long. I'm not sure if this got great or not. Let's try that one more time. Or maybe my computer is just having a bad day. All right, so it seems to be a little slow. Apologies. Let's try that a second time. Should take maybe 2-3 seconds. Okay, not sure why this is taking so long, but while it's doing something, hopefully, let's take a look at the README. So we're gonna go through our steps here. I'm trying to create my virtual environment. Next, I'm going to source it. So let's see if that is, there we go. Okay, that took a really long time. I maybe just need to reboot my computer. But once we create a virtual environment, we need to get into it. So that's source, the name of your virtual environment, /bin/activate. Note that if you're on a Windows machine, this command's likely going to be a little different. So I need to Google that. I don't have that memorized offhand. But once I hit enter, notice that my prompt is pre-printed with my virtual environment name. So we're now in that bubble that we talked about. So we can go from here. All right, so I created my virtual environment. I'm in my virtual environment. Aiden, what's the next step I should do here to get a Django project started?
Yeah, I'm gonna install my kind of modules that I'm using. So like are in Django. So pip install Django.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we're going to do now install what we want to use. here we're installing Django. Again, this can be a particular Django version that's going to be tied to our project. So that, if an upgrade of Django comes out, well, great, we don't have to use that version. And again, the reason is because certain upgrades to versions can break backwards compatibility. So here we downloaded Django. A few other libraries were downloaded. There's ASGIREF, SQL parse. I don't really know what those do, but Django requires them. All right, thanks, Aiden. Let's go and ask Suruchi, what should I do next? What's a good recommendation for what I should do next after I install Django?
I guess create requirements. I mean, I guess that's optional, requirements.txt.
Yep, absolutely. So this is optional. I'm glad you mentioned that, but we generally want to get into the practice of freezing our requirements list. We do pip freeze, and then requirements.txt is a good standard naming for a file. Again, it does not have to be named this, but it's highly recommended because that's kind of a standard. So they hit pip freeze requirements.txt. Thank you, Surichi. That creates a list of all the versions that are currently used in this virtual environment. If I install new libraries in this virtual environment, I would need to pip freeze again. This isn't automatic. This is a manual process that we had to go through. Cool. Thanks so much. All right, so we downloaded Django. We created requirements.txt. I'm going to add one more thing in here. So we probably want to do a git ignore. I half the time honestly forget to do this. So since I remembered, I'm going to do it myself. Git ignore, and I don't want my virtual environments, and usually PyCache is something that I ignore here. All right, so this will tell my Git project to ignore my virtual environment because we don't want to commit that. And any other extra files, there's probably additional files I could add here. I forget who linked it, but someone linked like a good kind of like master list of everything you want to ignore for a Python project. And there's like at least 24, if not more, list of files that you might want to ignore. But I'm just going to go with these two for now. All right, so git ignore, again, .git ignore is the exact file name that you have to use in order for your Git project to know what to ignore. Any questions about the steps so far? I feel like we've done this before, so hopefully you guys are familiar with this process, but I want to make sure we're all good. All right, let's keep going. So I've gotten my Django downloaded. Let's go with Porfi. What do I do next to get this project off the ground?
You'd go into your, I guess you don't have to go into it, but you want to use Python to run that manage.py file and do start project.
Yep. So we do need to start the project, but we can't do it through manage.py because manage.py doesn't exist yet. So normally you are right. We need to do everything through Python manage.py once we have our Django project created. But to create our Django project, we want to do Django admin start projects, project, and then give our project name. So I'm going to call this school roster proj, kind of a long name, but I like appending proj on my folder name so I know what it is. Again, we put this period here, and I recommend that. If you do not put that period there, it's going to create nested folders. I think I showed that earlier this week, but I always just put that period there so I don't get nested folders. All right, so Django admin. Notice that two things get created: a folder for my project and manage.py. So there's that manage.py file that Porfi mentioned. We're going to be using that from here on out. All right, let's ask our next buddy, Brian. What should I do next? I have my project created. What's the next likely step I want to do?
You have to create an app. So
Yep.
You want to do Python manage.py and then start app with your app name.
Absolutely. You guys seem great. Seem like you guys are comfortable with this. Yeah, start app. I don't want to give it a name. Let's call it school roster. We're going to regret long names here, but school roster app is what I'm going to call that. So notice another folder got added here, school roster app. That is my app folder. This is my project folder. I think we're good to go. All right. Thanks for helping me out, guys. I think I could take it from here, but actually, let's ask one more person. Let's go with Ivan. Ivan, I've created my app. I've created my project. What's the next likely thing I should just do right away?
Include the app in the installed apps on your settings.
Yep, exactly what I was looking for. So it's easy to forget, but you want to tell your project that you have a new app that it's going to reference. So I'm going to add the app name here. School roster app. Grant, you have a question?
Yes, I didn't know. Are we going to be going over today, re-entering these virtual environments? Because I was trying to do it for the school app to follow along here, and it didn't really go as planned. So just didn't know if that was something we were going over today.
We can. So that's a great question. So I guess I'm not quite sure what you might be dealing with, but with our virtual environments, if I ever want to get out of it, I could just trash my terminal and bring up a new one. That's the easy way. You could also run the deactivate command. So this is on the Mac. If you're on Windows, it might be a little different. If I run deactivate, that's going to drop me out of my deactivate. Notice that I've lost my virtual environment now, but it's still around. Like it didn't delete your virtual environment or my virtual environment. If I want to get back into it, I just need to source.vnv, do that same command again to get back into it again. I don't need to recreate it. I just need to re-get into it, which is the source getting to that activate command. I don't know if, are you running into any errors or it's just not working for you?
Yeah, maybe we'll just talk about it offline because it was saying that Django is not found anymore. And
we definitely can take it offline. Maybe a TA can help you. I do know, I can mention this from experience. If you rename or relocate your virtual environment folder, that can cause some issues. So if you do either one of those, I usually just need to delete it and recreate a brand new one. If
that would be the issue. Okay, thanks.
Cool. All right. So I thank you everyone for helping me get this set up. Let's kind of get this moving. I think we are mostly familiar with how to set up a project. So let's get this going. I'm going to run Python manage.py migrate. Again, we talked about this is optional, but we'll take away some warnings. So I'm just going to run that. Notice that Django had some stuff they wanted us to do. And now I think that's all I need to do. I'm going to do Python manage.py run server. And this should launch a server. Hopefully I don't have that port in use. I already have that port in use. That's fine. I'll go to 8888. All right, so my server is running on localhost port 8888 because that's the port I told it to run on. Let's see if our Django project's up. So this is not what I want. All right, so that's not what I want. Looks like I do have another project going. That's what I want. All right, so if we've done everything correctly, this is our Django welcome page telling us, hey, your server's up and running. You're good to go. So with that out of the way, let's actually get to the fun part, which is the challenge. So we need to relocate some logic for the directions. We're providing you with the classes from the school interface project. So again, you guys remember we created a student class, a staff class, maybe a base class, but I don't think, I'm not sure if we have that, we'll check. Then we also have data, a data folder, which has our CSV files in them. So we're gonna use these two within our Django projects. We need to relocate a couple of them. Just to mention here, we're being asked to move our classes into a file called models.py. We haven't quite really talked about models.py in the way Django is meant for us to use that file. But the reason we're asking you to do this, or we're being asked to do this, is kind of to simulate models.py, what it might look like, where we usually have all of our data classes in one single file. I know that's kind of backwards to how we normally organize classes, which is a different file for each, but models.py is, again, the Django spot looking for our data. All right, so I'm going to do that quickly. Hopefully it won't be too tedious. We have 4 classes. I'm going to move all of these classes into my app folder, models.py. And this is a file that should exist. I just want to replace this with my classes. So class person, then I have student. Hopefully this won't be too much work. I don't need my includes where I include one file from another because everything's going to be one file. So let's just do this quickly. Again, the ordering of your classes do matter. So since student inherits from person, you need your person class to be defined first. If you swap the order of this, you'll get an error saying, hey, person's not defined, so we can't create a student class definition. All right, we have staff also. Let's get this over. Any questions while I do some copy and pasting?
It's more about high level, but whenever we're working, say, with a much more expansive set of classes for data, and we're getting, hundreds, maybe even thousands of lines of codes, does Python have it easily set for kind of divvying that out instead of having it all in one file in models?
Oh, that's a good question. I've not gotten to that point where I have like that many classes. I would imagine you can create your separate classes and just import them into models. But I believe models is the central place that Django needs access to your classes. So yeah, we can create kind of side files, but then import them all into models. If that might be a better organization in this case too, because I have quite a lot of code in my models. So might explore that for future revisions, but good thought there. All right, so we have our 4 classes. Again, the ordering here does matter, especially when we're using inheritance. The inherited class has to be declared first. All right, cool. We did that. And then we want to keep our data folder where it is per the directions. Okay, I think we're good to go. I don't think we need this folder anymore, so I'm just going to delete it. All right, let's get this going. All right, so that was the boring part. Let's actually create stuff now. So going back to our not so fancy diagram, if I slideshow this, we had our food takeout example, right, where we had a customer, order taker, chef. That wasn't really relevant. I know it's a terrible analogy, but this is our kind of high-level Django overview. So the client is your browser. That's making requests to our server. The server accepts that through our project URLs and then does the routing. It determines who's going to actually handle this request. And our views.py file has our view handlers. Those are like the central pieces that kind of facilitate all the work that needs to be done. So again, once we get into using a database and models, views will be kind of corresponding with our models, and then eventually rendering a template, which we delivered back to the end user, which is the browser. So first thing is we need to make sure we have, again, you can do this in any order, but we want to have our view handlers, make sure we have routes that call the view handlers, and then create templates for our users. Again, models and database, not really going to be used for our needs here. So let's, I usually like starting with my views, because that's, again, like the central processing spot for everything. So let's go to our app folder, views. And then I think our README file had a starter code. So I'm just going to, if they provide me starter code, I'll use it. So let's see what's in our starter code. Again, anytime you copy and paste code, make sure you take the time to understand what you're copying and pasting. Don't just accept it and assume you know it. So it looks like we have a school instance that we're creating. So we import the school model, we create our school instance here, and then we're going to use that school instance for some display purposes. So it looks like our index index view handler is already completed for us. So this is our starting point. Again, the key things we want to reflect here is we use the render method, which is something we import from Django. This is going to take in our original request. Again, our request object's always going to be passed to any view handler you create. We're going to tell it which template we want to render, and then any data that template should have access to. All right, so in this case, our template index.html will have access to a variable called school_name. So this is the actual variable name that our template will use. This is just the value. Again, this is just the value also. So whatever you technically name those variables does not matter for your template. I know there was some confusion about that before, but again, this is just a variable name that is not going to play any role in terms of how we access data in our template. Any questions about that?
I just had a quick question on the URLs.py. What's a good way to remember what the project URLs.py versus the app URLs.py? What's a good way to remember those two?
Remember them in what context?
On what they do. So, because they're both with the same name, like for instance, client side, I believe the URLs.py is trying to talk to the app. That's why we're putting that app, or why we put that settings.py in there, so we can start talking to the other app. Is just visually trying to see the flow.
Gotcha.
Of
yeah, understandable, because in my diagram here, I only have URLs.py. Just remember that your project is kind of like the top level. So your project's gonna get the first request. So your project URLs, if I could find it, that's my app. This is the first place that Django is going to check for anything. So I don't have like a good, I guess, other than just remembering it, I don't have a good, like, I guess, approach to knowing how this is done, but just know that projects URLs, if I can type, is the first. I don't want to write it in caps. So yeah, again, it's just kind of memorizing it that your project URLs is the first spot that the routing will go through. So if there's nothing else here, if we only have, path admin, this is the only route available. But we usually want to tell it to look into our app. So that's where we kind of link our app URLs with our product URLs. So here, I'm just going to call it whatever base I want to give it. Again, this is just a naming choice. I could call this school. I could call this donuts, right? It's just whatever I want to call it, but we'll go with school because that's what our project's about. You can leave it blank too. There's no requirement that you put something here, but kind of have that organization, kind of like folder structure. I always like putting something there, and we include the name of our app. So this is a string, name of our app, your school roster app dot URLs. That is the module it's going to look in. But we have not created this. This is something we need to actually create. I think I went down a tangent here, so we'll get to that in a second. Hopefully you guys don't mind me bouncing around. But let's take a look at our views. So we have index, and now we want to create something that's going to link to our index, a view handler. So that's when we want to create a route. So in our app folder, we need to create a new file called urls.py. All right, and it's going to look very similar to our project URLs. So if I bring that friend back up, I'm just going to copy and paste this because I don't want to forget it. Again, this is a reserved kind of variable. It must be named URL patterns. You can't change the name of it because Django is looking for exactly URL patterns and what's assigned to it. So again, that's Djangoisms. We just got to work with whatever Django is expecting. So I go to my app URL. I'm just going to paste what I copied for my project URLs, deletes what I don't need. So we only want path here. So let's start adding some paths. So I'm going to use empty path here as my home page. So here we need to call our view handler, or as in specify which view handler is going to be called. So to do that, I need to import our views. So again, we have, let me try to make this a little larger. All right, so we have views.py, that is a module. We are importing everything from there and getting access to an entire module here. So now I could do views.index because I have that index view handler right here. That's what it's referring to. So we're basically telling this route, hey, when you get a request for this particular URL pattern, you should call views.index to handle that request. Optionally, but highly recommended, we should provide a name for this route. We can call it home. Again, this does not need to match anything about my route view handler. So we'll call that home, and that is our route. So we created a route, we created a view. The third piece of the puzzle is we need to create a template that's going to be rendered for our user. All right, so just to kind of reiterate what the flow is going to be, our project URLs gets a request, right? And it's going to search through all of its path and say, all right, who's going to handle this? Is this an admin URL pattern? Nope. Is this a school URL pattern? For us, it's going to be, since it's say, all right, look additionally in this URL file, and then it's going to go down however many routes we have here. It's going to try to match whatever the request was. And then based on that, we'll do the appropriate logic. Was there a hand raised there? Courtney.
What was the name home for? Like, what does that do?
Yep. So this name value, as I mentioned, is optional for this path function, but name will allow us to reference this route by name. Now that probably doesn't mean much to you right now, but this will give us that flexibility, which we'll see in a second when we get to our templates. But yeah, if I don't answer that, let me know, but we'll see this in our templates. So let's actually get to creating our templates. So in my app folder, I need to create a new folder called templates. Again, this must be named templates. All right, you don't really, you could customize it, but that requires more work. So just take it as we say it. Always create a templates folder. Under there, you can create an additional folder. Let's call it pages, because that's what I go with. In here, I'm going to create my templates. So I'm going to have an index.html, because that's what I referenced from my view handler. I wish I had more space here. Let's get rid of some of these files. All right, so views. I'm rendering a template called pages/index.html. I need to create that. So that's what I created with my index.html here. Let's create our HTML file. So let's do it this way. Don't have a style sheet right now. That's fine. All right, so I'm just going to create a quick HTML page. This is going to be my home page. My home page should probably, list my school name and give me links to view all staff and view all students. This is coming from the requirements of our challenge. So again, this is a bare bones HTML file. I'm going to add some content here. So let's go with H2. Say welcome to school.name. All right, so this is where we get our Jinja syntax, right? So double curly braces is essentially like that string interpolation that we use in Python and JavaScript. This is a Jinja syntax to interpret a variable, and then it'll be converted to its value. So I'm gonna likely pass in something called school, and that's gonna have a name attribute, and I wanna say directory. Under here, I'm gonna provide 2 links. So let's have an unordered list. I'm going to hard code this because I know exactly what I want. I want to have staff, all staff, and I'm going to have all students. So only 2 table content entries here, all students and all staff. So this is going to be an A tag. So that's how we create links. And this is hopefully will answer Courtney's question. What is the point of that name value? Well, there's 2 ways we can link to the appropriate page you want to go to. So I'm going to put href. One way is I could just tell it what exact path I intend. So I might go staff might be my route that I go to. So let me actually create this route to hopefully make more sense. So I'm going to create another path. We're going to have staff as one path, and this is going to be the list staff page, or whatever I want to call it. Okay, so I have a list staff route. I'm going to create a few more since I'm in here. I think actually our starter code or our challenge provides us with these. So I'm just going to copy and paste so I don't need to type as much. Okay, so I copy and pasted from the challenge directly. Again, there's some starter code provided. We have 5 routes here. One is going to be that staff route, which lists all the staff. One for staff detail, list all students and student detail. Now, to link to this route, there are 2 ways to do it. If I go back to my template, I can just say /staff. Let me split screen this, maybe that's better. All right. So here I'm going to navigate to staff /. That is going to find this route for us. All right, so that's totally will work. Let's do a href for our students. All right, that would match this route right here. I think let me make this smaller. All right, so that's going to work. We could actually prove that to ourselves by, I guess we could try to link to it, but we don't have any view handlers. So let's put an HTTP response here quickly. HTTP response. All staff. All right, got that imported. Thank you, VS Code. All right, let's see if this works. So I have my index.html template that I created. We're going to render that and see if this link actually works. So my Django server is still running. I want to go to /school. So that's my base for my app. Looks like my server died along the way. School roster app.urls. Looks like I have some naming issues. urls.py is there. School roster app.urls. What did I screw up here?
You say your app name?
I think I did, but I could have typoed that. Always good to check school roster app. Maybe just take down my server. Sometimes restarting our server could fix it. I'm not sure if that's the case here, but let's give it a try. Yeah, so it looks like if you maybe change your settings, maybe always just refresh your server because the server kind of gets out of sync with your data maybe. Okay, cool. So hopefully if I refresh here, there we go. So welcome to, notice we don't have a name here because we didn't pass anything to our page there, but we have a link to all staff. If I click on that, notice we get to the list staff page. But looks like my template's incomplete. I was expecting to pass the school variable, right? If I look at my template here, I'm using a variable called school, but I have not provided access to any variable or any data for my template, because right here, it looks like my variable was school name and not school. So I think I just need to match that. So again, the variable name that you use must match the key, some key in your data dictionary. So if I rename this, I will need to rename this value right here. All right, but now that I'm actually matching those, let's see if that makes a difference. Here we go. So my school is named Django School. So welcome to Django Schools directory. And now we have our homepage. I want to pause here. Want to make sure we answer questions. If I'm going too fast, let me know. What questions you guys have about getting to this homepage with regards to the routing, to the view handler, or the template that we created? No questions there? Andrew.
I have a question, but it's kind of about like the way you pass through my data, school name, and my school.name.
Okay.
So the initial part, my data, doesn't really matter what you name it because you're not going to access it off that name, right?
Correct.
Then afterwards, that render request always takes in a dictionary.
Yes, that's optional, but yes, it's a dictionary.
And then to access the dictionary, you don't go off the value key, you go off the key value. So the school underscore name.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Again, this dictionary name matters not at all. So you don't call my data within your template. It's these variables are the things that your template has access to.
I just get a little confused because so it wasn't this problem, but it was the other problem with the polls, because like what we passed in as the value for the dictionary key was like a list, and then there's dictionary values inside that list itself.
Yeah.
And like the way you would access it is like, I guess in this case, it would be key, then key again, or key, list index, key.
Yeah, again, if your data,
Yeah.
like if this data were a dictionary, then yeah, you would need to access that just like a dictionary in your template. It's
Yeah.
the outer dictionary that doesn't matter, like in terms of the name of it, but the structure obviously internally matters. So again, if I pass a dictionary here, then on my template, I need to, get the appropriate key values out of there. I don't know if that's really answering your question, but yeah, the structure can get complicated. In this case, we just have a string, but there's nothing stopping us from passing a list or a dictionary or a list of dictionaries, dictionary of lists, whatever combination you want.
So if that string right there was a list or dictionary, you can't access it directly, right? You actually have to access the key value first.
Yeah. So if I pass a dictionary,
Yeah. Yep.
I can't just go to my template and say, show me the dictionary. Like if this were a dictionary, HTML is not going to know how to kind of render a dictionary when it's trying to create this page. Like again, HTML only is displaying texts and values. If you pass a dictionary or array, it's not going to show anything.
I think that helps a little. I was just like super confused when I was going through like the other ones on like what was getting passed through and how to access it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely see a little bit more usage of the dictionary, but going back to Courtney's question, because I temporarily forgot. All right, so I linked it like this and it works, but the better Django way to do it is to actually use the route name. So since we provided a route name, right, we called this route list staff. I want to use that, and we'll see again, the benefit is it's a little more flexible. So if I use my Jinja syntax, the URL function, I need to pass it the name of my route. In this case, it's list staff. And this needs to be in strings, of course. All right, so we list staff, and there's no parameters we need to pass the list staff method. So that's, we don't have anything extra here. Now, both of these methods will link to the same exact page. The question is, why is this preferred? So to answer Courtney's question directly, this is where we're using that name that we provide, list staff, list underscore staff is what we named it. So we look at our URLs in our app. That is how the name is being used. Now the question is, well, why is this better? Well, let's say 3 months from now, our customer says, well, we don't want to have a staff URL. We want to have, we want to call this all staff. Whatever reason they want, the customer's always right. That's the mantra, right? So if they say, hey, we want our route to be all staff now. Well, okay, well, I changed it here. Am I good to go now? Well, it depends on what my templates are doing. If my templates are using kind of this static standard way of hard coding the route name, the route path, then I need to go through all my templates. In this case, I have one template, but imagine a project that has 40 different templates. I gotta go back and replace all of these. What if I miss one? That's gonna cause problems. Again, that's not writing dry code. It's repeating it. We're repeating ourselves by replacing multiple places. This method, I don't need to change anything. This is saying, all right, look up whatever route is list staff, and that's the pattern it's going to look for. So again, the actual name or the actual path does not matter when we use name routes, because all the changes are made in this file. So I could change this however I want, so long as I don't change the name of my route, then all my templates will be none the wiser. They don't care about what the exact path is. They just want to know where it should go. Shun?
Yeah, so on a previous example, you had an app name. Is that just applicable if you have multiple apps?
Yes. Yeah. So Shun has a good comment. App name is a very pre-reserved variable in Django. You can provide it a name. Let's just call it roster app. So I just want to highlight that this name does not need to match your actual app name here. In practice, you should. So I've called my app school roster app. Here, I should probably call this school roster app, but you don't have to. Like I have a really long name here, so what if I just want to shorten it to roster? That's fine. But if you have an app name here, then your templates need to specify the app name and then colon and then the route name. And yes, to double back on what Shun said, if you have multiple apps, this is why you want app names, so that you can distinguish exactly what route you're referring to and not have it be ambiguous accidentally. But yeah, for when you have only a single app, you don't really need to bother with that. So I can leave that off and it'll be fine. Okay. Any other questions about linking? I think that's a new topic we talked about. So again, both of these highlighted portions will do the exact same thing. This is preferred because this is more dynamic. So I'm going to actually delete this. Let's update our all students. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, let's get this going. I feel like we're going a little slow. Let's get some of these other views. Courtney.
Going off of the previous question, I'm assuming most larger applications will have multiple apps.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything else we need to know, like in order to do that?
Nope. The more apps you add, just make sure you update your settings and say, all right, I got 5 different apps. Let me list those all here. Probably want to add that app name if you have multiple apps. I don't think anything else would really change. I guess you need to add, URLs here. So if I had a school app and then let's say I had a grading app and then like a attendance app, then I would add all those paths here so that, again, the project URLs is the main router. So I need to tell it about all the other routes that exist. Okay, let's go to our view handlers. We got, looks like 4 views to implement, but they hopefully shouldn't be too difficult. Let's do our list staff view since we're doing that first. List staff, our goal here is to list every single staff member that exists in our data. So again, all the data portions handled by our school object. If we kind of peek into models, this is what we kind of copied and pasted. We create a school instance. School instance will load all the staff and load all the students, reading the CSV files, getting them in. We don't need to worry about that. Again, CSV files are not a focal point here. So you can read the data files and read the data in. That's done for us already, so I don't need to worry about that. What I do want to do here is how do I get, I need to create a template and how do I list all the staff that I have? So first I'm going to create a data dictionary. And I know I want to pass it all staff, so I'm going to call it all staff. And that's going to be set to my school. That's my school instance. And I have staff. Yep. So this is a list. As Andrew was mentioning before, you could have a list, you could have a dictionary. There's no real limit to what type of data structure you can have. So this is going to be a list of staff. A list of staff instances. And then I want to render something. So render pass our request. I'm going to create a new template called pages. Let's call it list staff.html. And then I need to pass it that data dictionary. All right, so we did our routing. we did our view handler. The third step is we need to create our template. So I go to pages. Let's create a new page. Will let me. Let's call this list staff. And this is where I'm going to take a slight detour because we learned something new, I think on Wednesday of this week is, all right, well, I could kind of just copy and paste, this, and then put that in my list staff and then modify this as I want. But that's kind of has a lot of redundant code, right? I have, my body and head section, HTML, all this stuff is standard. It's standard enough where all my pages are going to have the same general structure. So I'm going to create a base template. So here I'm going to create a new file and call it base.html. I think you might have seen it as layout.html, perhaps in other challenges. But here, this is what my kind of core template of templates, if you will look like. So I'm going to do HTML. All right. So here I've got like a pre-coded template here. Notice I have a section for a title, and I have a section for something I call main content. So now that I have these blocks, I can extend this template and fill in those blocks with my other pages. So if I want to extend this template, I'll go to my index and go, all right, well, I have access to that. So I'll do extends base.html. I need my % signs, of course, easy to forget. And now I don't need all of this stuff. All I need is this snippet, right? That is my main content. So I'll tell it that's my main content. Yelin, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So just want to make sure, does it influence anything if you put the base.html in a different level as the other templates?
That's a good question. So I think this is relative to your templates folder. So if I put this in my pages folder, then I would need to put pages, I think here. We could try that out. So again, if my base HTML was in my templates here, then I would need to specify it's in that folder. We'll try it out though. I think the location can matter. So I don't want to take that for granted. All right, we need a title, so let's get that quickly going. All right, so I'm just modifying my existing index.html to use the additional templating features. So let's go with, I hate that the name is called templates because we have HTML templates and then templates for those templates. Always trips me up, but let's call this school directory. In fact, let's actually use our school name. Since we have that variable, we can put that in our title too. Okay, so that's my title. And then my main content's here. I don't need all the extra repetitive stuff here, so we can delete it. Let's make sure that this did not break our homepage. I totally could have messed something up. So let's double check. So I go back to school, templates, main contents. All right, oops, there should be end block, typos galore. So anytime we open a block, we need to end it with an end block. So make sure you don't mistype it like I did. All right, there we go. So notice that nothing's changed except I have to all staff. That is probably a goof. All right, so nothing's changed. It looks the same for the end user, but now we kind of have that base template that we could use for additional pages. And it becomes really beneficial when we want to apply like CSS to all of our pages. We just need to do it in that one central base template file instead of in all of our additional pages. So I think Yelin's question was, what if we move our base to our pages folder? Does that matter? Let's find out. Yes, it does not. It does matter. So again, these names are relative to your templates folder. So since I moved base.html into pages, I would need to say, hey, all right, pages.base.html, even though index is already in our pages folder. So I do this now, we should find that template hopefully. There we go. So yes, it does matter the location. Just make sure you are mindful of how that path is being resolved. It's being resolved relative to this templates folder, not the specific file.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. All right, we'll probably due for a break here soon. So let's get our all staff page going and then we'll take a break after that. So list staff, I'm going to copy my index.html. It's going to look very similar using that templating style. So we extend base HTML. We want a title here. So let's say, let's call this all staff. staff directory. Our main content's gonna show all staff. And then we want to list author staff. So we're gonna use some Jinja, or I guess Django templating syntax, which is essentially Jinja. We need to do a for loop. So this is where we use our syntax here for staff in all staff. Again, just to highlight, where is this variable name coming from? Well, if we look at our views, split this out. Our views specified a variable that's going to be called all staff. That is what we're matching right here. And since it's a list, we can iterate over a list, just like we do in Python. The only difference for our for loop is we need to tell this when our for loop ends. So I'm going to add an end4. Now anything in between here will be looped over, and we'll create elements based on what we tell it to do. So we'll say unordered lists, and we want to create list items for all of those staff members. So we'll do list item, and then probably want to show the staff name. So staff.name. So notice how we're accessing these values. This is, again, this is an object that has a property .name, right? If we look at our models, go to, I guess, person, we have a .name property, .age, password, and role for both staff and students. So that is where that .name property is being accessed from. All right, when you show the name, we probably want to show a link from that name. So we'll say an A tag, make sure we surround exactly what we want to link. This A tag is going to use href. And remember, the better way we want to do things here is using the relative or the named route. So I'm going to do URL, name of my route, student detail or staff detail. Again, this name, just to make sure we're all good, is coming from right here, staff detail. It's kind of wrapping weirdly, but you guys can see it. So staff detail is the name of this route. That's why I put that name right here in quotes. Notice that we use double quotes for our href, so we use single quotes for our additional string inside of a string. But in this case, notice that we have employee ID that we need to specify, right? If I go to click on employee 1, that page is going to show something else than if I click on employee 2. So based on whichever employee ID we provide, that is how the staff detail page is going to know exactly what information to show. So we need to pass this route an employee ID. Luckily, we do have access to that because our staff object has an employee ID as an attribute. So there are two ways we can pass this. We can pass this as a positional argument, or we can pass this as keyword arguments. In this case, it doesn't matter because we only have one argument, but just know that I could target this by saying employee ID equals whatever value, and now this is a keyword argument. Nothing changes functionally, but you do have the option of specifying exactly what parameter you're targeting. So this is going to hit up this route. This route's going to say, all right, call staff detail. So if I look at my views, too many files open, don't I? Views. So here, notice that staff detail takes in our request and an employee ID, which we've told it is going to be the value of staff.employee ID. All right, so if that works correctly, we should see a list of all of our staff that's going to link to each staff detail page. All right, let's test this out. Maybe I've done this correctly. Maybe I've made a mistake. If I click on all staff, I'm missing my template.
I think it didn't finish the curly bracket. Is it?
Sorry, I might need some help here. So I did not finish my.
Yeah,
Line 11.
base.html wasn't moved back out to the template folder.
Oh, double errors on my part. Yep, thank you guys. So I'm glad you guys are correcting me. It makes me confident that you guys are understanding Django. Yeah, I need to move this back out. And additionally, I was missing my percent curly brace in my href here. So many mistakes, but you guys got my back. Appreciate it. Let's go back here. All staff. All right, there we go. So these are our 5 teachers coming from our CSV file. Notice when I hover over these, notice the route at the very bottom. It changes each time I go over them. The ID is different. It's probably hard to see on your screen, but at the bottom left, it tells me where this is going to take me. So if I try to go to these, they're not going to work, but oops. but it'll show you where you're trying to go. So in this case, I was trying to go to this staff because that's the staff ID for where I clicked on. This one is a different ID. It's 85545 versus 86545. So again, depending on which staff you click on, you're going to a different specific route, different specific page, but the route will extract the employee ID and we'll see how we can use that after the break. All right, what questions do you guys have about the all staffs page? Hopefully we understand how to make a template, how to link all these good things. I'll leave this up over break, but you guys can kind of stare at it. If any questions pop up, let's answer them after break. So it's 11:06. Let's take a 9-minute break and we'll be back after that. All right, so before the break, we completed our all staff page. So we had to, again, just going over everything we did, we had to create a route for it. So this was, let me get some space here. So we have 5 routes. We created an all staff route. We called it list staff. The list staff view handler is going to handle that one. And then if we look in our views, we are simply gathering up all the staff and passing that data to our template, which is list staff. And our template looks something like this, nothing too crazy going on. We're showing, going through a for loop, which is our all staff list, and creating a list items for each of those. So our end result was something that looked like this. We have the staff name, and then we should be able to click on them and get to the staff detail page. That's our next challenge here. Let's go about doing that a little quicker, unless we have any questions about that. And I get rid of split views. All right, so just repetition. We have our route, staff / the ID, employee ID will be the staff detail route. We need to implement staff detail in our views. So here, we take in our request and notice we get an employee ID that is coming from the URL that we're going to. So we're going to staff/2. Employee ID would be a value of 2. All right, so let's get to implementing this. It's going to be very similar to what we did before. Create a data dictionary. In this case, I'm going to call this just staff. And then that's going to be the value of my staff. Now the question is, how do I actually get the staff given the employee ID? Well, if you kind of peeked in our models, we did provide this functionality for you. So hopefully you didn't reinvent the functionality, but it's fine if you did. We have a find staff by ID method that notice takes in an employee ID. It's going to loop over all of our internal staff data. And then once it matches any staff with that ID, it's going to return it. Otherwise, we'll get none back. So we shouldn't expect any errors. We could always check to make sure we don't get none back. But here we could say staff is going to be my school, find staff by ID, pass the employee ID. Again, this method was provided for us, but you could easily do this yourself too. So we get the staff member. Hopefully it's not none. So we'll just assume it's not, but we should maybe error check. Kat, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we're ever writing like helper functions, kind of, should those go in our views.py or should they always go in the the models folder or models file?
Great question. So models should only contain your data classes. They should not and usually will not have any methods within them. So again, we'll talk more about models in a couple of weeks, I think. To answer your question, I'd create, there's nothing wrong with creating a helpers.py file and keeping kind of like your helper methods in there. I would prefer that my view methods only have view handlers in them. So if I had a shared function, I would probably organize them into a different file. Maybe not always if it's a really quick and dirty helper function, but yeah, I would definitely be mindful of organization. So you create as many new files as you want, but the main ones, models.py, views.py, urls.py must exist for Django. But you can include whatever else you want in them. All right, so we have staff here. I have my data dictionary. Let's get this going. Request template's going to be pages/staff detail. You want to call that HTML. And then again, pass it our data, which is going to contain one staff object. That's what that is. All right, cool. My data, why is that grayed out? Not sure. Oh, the period there. All right, so I need to create this template. That should not be too much work because now I'm just gonna create a new file. Let's call that staff detail. And then it's gonna be an HTML file. Gonna look very similar to my index file. So much I'm just gonna do a copy and paste if you guys don't mind. All right, so this is gonna be, let's call it staff detail. All right, H2 tag, I'm going to show the staff member's name. And then maybe some H3. I think staff.role was a thing. What else do we have? Again, this is going to be the most glamorous page, but just showing data. So let's have some paragraph tags. Go ahead, staff. Age, I think, was one. What else? Let's roll. I think there's password. I don't know if we want to show their password, but whatever. We don't care about security today. We'll show all the passwords. I'm probably forgetting something. Role age ID, I think, was one of them. So we'll do that here.
Does it matter that the keys are capitalized?
Keys are capitalized. Are you talking about right here?
Yeah.
So those aren't keys. These are just, this is text. So anything outside of my curly braces, that's just text I want to show. So this is just for my benefit visually, or for the user's benefits, but these aren't referring to any keys or any data structures. The actual data is anything in my curly braces. All right, so that's my staff detail. Again, didn't require too much work, especially with my base template there. I think that should be it. I might have forgot something, but let's see if this works. So refresh here. All right, so I got something, but I didn't get anything that I wanted. Notice this is blank. So I got to my page, my template file is working. It looks like my data extraction is not working. So again, this happens, totally fine. Let's try to figure this out. So if I go to my views, let's do some debugging here. So let me print the employee ID. You could actually hook up your VS Code debugger to your Django project too. It's a little tedious or not as simple as before, but it's possible. I'm just gonna do print statements right now. So print staff and ID. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm getting what I expect. So I should get the employee ID here, get the staff object. Hopefully it finds it. Yeah, let's see what's going on here. So if I refresh this page, my server should spit out what I'm looking for. So let's try that one more time. Okay, so if I go here, notice I get ID equals 86545. I believe that's correct, but my staff is none. The answer, as I just realized it, is because I bet I'm storing the values as strings and not integers. I think we came across this at a stand down. So I think our models are probably not the best. Let's actually fix that quickly. I want to use integers for the ID. That is my choice. So I'm going to go here and say, all right, this is going to be an int. We're not going to mess with string IDs. Apologies if you ran into this. This was not an intention to throw you off by comparing strings and ints. But I want to store these as integers. Again, anything from our CSV file is just going to be a string. In this case, I want this value to be numeric for whatever reason I chose. So now I believe my find staff ID should work because this is going to be an integer. Why is that going to be an integer, you ask? Well, it's because we said that's an int. We could probably make this a string if we wanted to work with strings, but I think IDs and integers go hand in hand. So I'm going to keep those at integers, but we are being passed an integer, and therefore we're going to look up the value by an integer. Let's see if this changes anything. Refresh. Ah, there we go. So we got Culpepper. He's a principal. So that's not actually true. If you are a Saved by the Bell fan, it's actually Belding that's principal. Not sure we're gonna have to fix that at some point. ID is principal. That is incorrect. Age is 25. Password is XX. I think that's correct. So I think I just screwed up something here. Yeah, not role. That should be employee ID. All right, cool. That was pretty simple. It won't surprise you that doing the same for our students and student detail, going to be the same exact thing. I'm going to copy and paste, and you might have that light bulb going on in your head. Well, if you're copy and pasting, is this dry code? You might have a point there. I'm going to just say I'm not writing too much here. So even though I'm kind of copy and pasting, I could spend the extra effort of creating like a generic function for listing, any type of people, but I don't want to go about that. So I'm going to choose to just kind of do some copy and pasting. List students. What does my list staff look like? Interesting. So there's a question here talking about dry code. I could actually probably re-leverage this template and use it both for my listing all staff and students. Now that's going to be a trade-off. It's going to require more kind of complexity with a simple file. So there may be a reason I might not want to do that. In this case, I don't want to because it's, again, not worth my effort. I think having a separate list staff, list students HTML page won't be too much repeated code. But again, it's up to you to determine if that is wise or not, in terms of if that is going to create headaches later on. It's all about coding for the now, but also coding for the future. So keep that in mind. But for now, I'm just going to go with a separate template file. So all students. I call that variable all students. We're going to go to student detail. So again, all this manual replacing I'm doing again could be removed if I created one template file for both. But in this case, I'm not going to reuse them too often, so I don't want to do that. Any questions as I go through this venture? Views, looks like we're getting student ID. That's the name that we chose, so we need to make sure we match that. So in my list student, again, my keyword argument should be the argument I expect. So this is going to be student ID, and then the value I pass is student.school ID, because that's how we store the ID in the students. And we have student here. Student.name should be fine. All right, make sure I got all of these. So I got students. This should be student 2. All students. Let me pause here. If there's enough interest, we can create a generic template for both. But if there's not, we can kind of keep going with this. I guess I can give you guys the option. All right, silence means I get to do what I want. So I'm going to keep it as is. Let's go back to our views. So we're doing list students here. We have our template that's checked off. We have our view handler that's checked off, and we have our route, right? We go to urls.py. We should have our route, which is /students. Should give us to the list students page. All right, let's see if this works. Let's go back to our home page. All right, so all students, that should have an S on it, should go to our student list page. All right, template does not exist. That's all right. Notice again, Django provides very good error reporting. So it looks like pages/list students HTML. I probably have a typo. Yep, I do. That should be list students with an S. Let's go to our home page also. It's not really bad with roles here. All right, so updated that. Let's go back. All right, so all students, but there's nothing here. So we're obviously missing something. Anyone happen to know what I missed here? I think I do, I know, but I was going kind of quickly, so it's probably easy. Andrew Tran, do you know what I missed?
Integer string conversion that you did for the other one.
I did that, so good guess. I think I didn't rename my data dictionary, is my guess. I'm not exactly sure. Nope, I think, yeah, I mistyped it there too. I think all students, plural. It's like the third time I haven't pluralized it. I probably need to go back to basic English. So all staff, all students. Notice I put an S there. My view data was not passing students, it was passing all students. So it just didn't have access to it. That was accidental, but typos happen. All right, more headaches. All right. So URL, student detail, student ID equals student.school ID. What is this telling me? It says reverse for student detail with keyword arguments student ID not found. Well, okay, that's informative. Let's try to narrow that down. So it looks like, again, we're trying to call a student detail route. Let's make sure we have a route named student detail, and let's make sure we have a parameter called student ID. All right, so if I go back to my code, student ID here, wait. Student ID, that is what we expect here. Let's look at our URLs, student ID, student detail. That looks correct to me. I am not seeing what's wrong here, but obviously they're saying it. Reverse the student detail with keyword arguments, student ID. Andrew, do you have a helpful hint here?
Isn't your student detail not defined in views? I think you just looked at it.
Yeah. Well, it is defined. It's not implemented.
Yeah.
But that should be fine. We're not linking, we're not going anywhere on there. As I'm not clicking a link to go anywhere. I'm just trying to show my students. So reverse for student detail with keyword arguments.
This is because the student, you're doing the list of students right now, right? You don't need the student ID for the list of students.
Correct, but let's actually take a look at our template. So I need my student ID here for the link that I'm creating.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. But it looks like my keyword argument is not working correctly. So student ID, where I do student.school ID. Am I storing that maybe as something else? Let's see what models has. Where's students? Student has school ID, so that's correct. I have an integer, which was another thing. Let me try it without a keyword argument, actually. So
Can you go back to, sorry, my dogs are going crazy, but I think you had it misspelled somewhere. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
quite
earlier.
possible. Where, do you remember where?
Maybe it might have been the data, honestly. I don't know if you've changed that. It was somewhere though. I saw that you had an extra letter in it.
Oh, okay.
You thinking
not very
about
helpful.
employee ID?
Sorry, what was it?
Courtney, are you thinking about employee ID?
No, I think it was, I'm not sure where it was, but it was somewhere.
Right here. Sorry, I think this is the problem. I have staff here, not student. Sorry, that's my bad. I should be better about renaming things. But we want to go through a for loop and give it student ID. Hopefully that's the issue. There we go. Sorry. Typos, not a good educational example there, but always make sure that when you do a manual replace, you replace everything. So here I call this staff instead of student. But now we have all of our students listed: Lisa, Jesse, Slater, Zach, Kelly, and Screech. All right, one more thing to do, and that's the student detail. And I want to do that a little quickly, if you guys will bear with me. I'm going to do some copy and pasting. Student detail, going to need to replace some stuff. So we want to find students. Get rid of employee ID, get rid of staff. We want a nice students. Student ID, find students. Hopefully I'll do all my replacing correctly. So this should be students. And then this should be student detail. I think I got them all, hopefully. Didn't miss anything. Again, nothing too crazy going on here. We find the student based on the ID that's passed in. Again, I want to highlight important Django thing is we're getting the student ID from the URL. So whatever's up here is where we get extract the ID from. So if I click on Lisa, her ID is 13345. That will be in the URL, and that's how the URL pattern says, okay, I know exactly what your student ID is because you told me kind of how to pick it up from that URL pattern. That's how we get our student ID passed here from the route. Then we look up our student through our data lookup. We create a data dictionary so that our template can refer to that student object. All right, so the last thing we need to do is create the template. It's gonna look very simple, similar to the staff detail. So much so I'm just gonna copy paste students detail.html, and we should get this done in the next, I don't know, 30 seconds, hopefully. Like use students. Oh, these gotta be students too. Or we should employ batch search and replace. All right, so we have all that. We have a school ID, not a employee ID. All right, I think that should be fine. Student detail. I think we're good. Hopefully, fingers crossed, no typos. So now if I click on Lisa, here we go. Lisa is a student with ID 13345, age 25, password XX. So again, everything we did with students was very similar to the staff, so that's kind of why I sped up there. But I want to make sure we take time to answer any questions about anything we did here. Any questions? You guys kind of good? Again, the three main pieces are create your routing through urls.py, create your view handlers through view.py, create your templates in a templates folder. And then once you hook those up together, you render a template, send it whatever data you need to, and then you're good to go. So, seems easy now, right? Would you guys agree or disagree with that statement?
I agree that it seems easy.
Let's chat with Sanjaya. Sanjaya, do you have any questions about what we did here in terms of a Django project? Anything that was unclear?
Not right now.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to ask the random students. All right, cool. So I think we accomplished our main challenge. So if you looked at the README, it talked about creating our templates, which we kind of followed. We created our routing. That was kind of given to us, so we don't need to come up with those routings ourselves. We released our application. So I think we tested our homepage, all staff detail. CSS styling would be a nice bonus. I'm gonna maybe hold off on that to the very end if we have time before lunch. But the thing I want to get to is, all right, we completed this challenge. Great. Let's do a quick, maybe a git commit. But I'm going to extend this challenge a little bit so we can learn a little bit more. So I'm going to do git add, git commit, completed main challenge. All right, cool. So I have that save point in case I screw anything up with this new thing that I'm going to add. But I'm going to delete or kind of hide some of these files. Yelan, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Just real quick. So when you commit, do you have to get out of your virtual environment, or it doesn't really bother you?
No, good question. You don't have to be outside your virtual environment. I just had to kill my server so I could get back to my terminal. I could have brought up a new terminal, but the virtual environment does not impact your Git project. Great question to ask. All right, so let's get back to my server, and I'm going to talk about what I want to add. So currently our application has the ability to read some CSV files and show the data on screen. Great, it's kind of cool. But what if, let's say I want to add some more functionality to the site? Specifically, what if I want to add the ability to add a new student to our roster, right? Students come and go each year or each semester. I want to provide the user of my application to add new students. Right now, I'm only going to worry about adding. I'm not going to worry about deleting or updating. But those are actions that you should get used to. So there's a term called CRUD, C-R-U-D. So maybe let's just type this out here. CRUD. So C would stand for create. Or R, which is what we do commonly. Read is like the easiest. You have data and you want to show it. We've done reading a lot. We have not really done updating of data. We'll get to that, I think, in a later Django week, but today's going to be kind of an intro to. So these are the 4 basic operations you do with data. You can read existing data, you can create new data, you can update existing data, or delete data from your source. So we've done reading where we're seeing we have data, we want to show it. That's easy. That's the easiest of the 4 here. I'm going to go over creating. Again, this is going to be a nice intro into Django week 2, which comes up in 2 weeks, where we are going to create apps that do all these functionalities. We're going to have databases, so it makes it a little easier. I'm going to worry just about the create just for today. All right, you guys with me? You guys excited? Sure. All right, so first thing I want to do is create a view. That's like where I like to start. So for this, I want to have the ability to add a student. So I'm going to call this student new as my route handler or view handler. That's going to take in a request. No additional parameters, right? When you're creating a new student, you don't need an ID. You can just do whatever you want. And then I'm going to pass for now. So I have my view handler. Let's create a route for it. So I'm going to go to my URLs in my app. Let's create a new route. So I'm going to call this path. Still maintain my same naming, so student/new. I'm going to hook it up to the views.student new view handler I created. Let's give it a name. Let's call this student new. Keep with our naming here. All right. So I temporarily created my view handler. I created my routing, and then I need to create a template eventually. Kat, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, you might have already said this and I missed it, but when you just did that path, does the name that was the name that you chose like completely random, or does it have to be like the same as the views dot whatever that is? Like, is that why you chose student new there?
It does not have to be the same. I can name this student create. Let's actually do that. I'm going to change it, use dashes and create. Usually I think I use dashes for names instead of underscores. I think I got away from that here. But let's just, for this example, kind of break our convention, go with student create, just to highlight that it does not need to match this name in any manner or this route location in any manner. Always good to kind of change it up. So this route is going to be named student create. Let's not forget that. All right, so I have my routes. Great, that was pretty easy. My view, I will need to add some logic here, but I'm going to add a template first. So I'm going to create a new student new template.html. And this is where we're going to talk about forms. So we did forms last week in our HTML week, but I don't think we got enough practice with them. So that's why I want to do this additional challenge. All right, so I'm going to create a new template, call it student new. I'm going to do the same extending here. So I'm going to copy from my other templates, drop this here. Let's call this page add new students. And now I want to add a form. So hopefully we're somewhat familiar with forms. That's how we capture user input through HTML pages. So let's go about creating a form. So let's maybe put a title here so we know what we're doing. All right, so to create a form, we use the form elements, open and close. Method, if you don't provide a method, the default method is going to be a get request. I generally always recommend a post request. There are reasons you might want to do a get or a post. Post kind of packages up the data and sends your data inside your request. If you do a get request, that's going to attach it to your URL. To remember those extra parameters that get added, but method post is going to give us a post request when we're processing this form. All right, so we'll send a post request. And we'll see that in play. This is not Python. Okay, so that's our initial form. Let's get to filling out this form with some goodies. So I want to create a new student. I'm probably going to need a name to capture it. So I'm going to create a label, which is just another form element. Let's call this name. Okay, so labels are just textual elements inside of a form. I'm going to create an input. This is the actual control where the user will enter their input. I'm going to give this a name. So remember, in forms, you can use IDs just like with any other attributes, but you want to provide a name attribute because that's how a form actually identifies your controls. It does not really care about IDs like we normally would. So ID of this can be, student name, doesn't really matter what I call this. But the name here, I'm going to call this name. There's a reason I want to call it name. I guess I could call that whatever, to be honest. But this for name is matching this name control. All right, let's have a placeholder. Those are nice to have. This is the prompt for the user. Let's call that student name. Elin, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. So the for, is it matching the name's key or the name's value?
Good question. It's matching the value. We'll see it. Unfortunately, I used the same key and value name. But let's do this again for. So we had name. I think age was another value. So in this case, I'm going to link it to the age control. I'll be honest, I'm not fully sure how these kind of link up. I need to do my own research, but this is the practice of providing the for attribute. All right, student's age. Let's just say age. All right, let's keep this going. So we have some elements here. Let's do a couple more. I think they had a password. Let's do ID. It's a little tedious, but we'll do it. I think I have provided code on the curriculum page, so if you want to just copy and paste or reference it later, it should be on the curriculum page for today. Say type equals password. Give us that nice look. Okay, so we have name, age, ID, password. I forget if we have anything else for our students. Anyone else remember? I think there's a fifth one, but maybe I'm making that up. All right, let's double check. Make sure we have all the parameters we want. I think role was the.
I think there's, yeah, sorry, I was going to say that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But in this case, role is always going to be the same for the students. So we don't want the user entering, the role name. They're always going to be students for this page. So we're going to leave that out. We'll add that in manually. ID, these should be different IDs. Age, ID. ID doesn't really matter. The key thing are these name attributes, and we'll see those in a second. So I have name, ID, age, and password as my fields. This is age, this is ID. Okay, so that was kind of tedious, but we got that going. Always remember, with a form, you also need a button to submit the form. So I'm going to do button and say add. student. And then this will be type submit. That is how your form knows that this button specifically will trigger the submit for the form. All right.
Also, Hunter, make sure you don't forget line 20, your 4.
Line 20. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure how badly that would screw things up for me, but we do want to match them. Thank you for looking out. All right, so this is our form. Let's see how that looks. Obviously, we need to render it from our views. So I'm going to do return render request and the template name pages / I think too quickly. I called it students new.html. And I don't think we have any data to pass it, right? And we're creating a new student. There's nothing we need to kind of add in already. So pretty simple here. We just return that page and we need some way to get to this view, right? There's nothing that links us. Let's actually go to our maybe all students page. So list students, let's create a new button so that we can add a new student. Maybe we'll do it up here. I like horizontal rules. So I'm gonna add a bunch of those in. HR, is that a button? And all right, so I want a button that's going to link to that route that I created, right? So my route here is name student create. That's the name I went with. So if I go back to my list students, again, I need some way to access that new route. So I'm gonna create a new button. I'm gonna create a link around that button. So a button within an a tag. This is getting unwieldy. All right, so I have a button within here. I'm just gonna tab this out a little bit. So this button is gonna say new student. Now we need to tell it where to go. So href, this is where we use that named route, if you guys remember, %%. We want to use the URL function. The name we gave it was create-student-create. Sorry, I'm forgetting all my names. And then no extra parameters here. I'm going to pause here because I think in case you're trying to follow along, you probably want to get some time to type. But again, what we're essentially doing here is adding some way to get to that new route. Again, this is going to be on our all students page or our list students page, whatever you want to call it. This button is going to allow us to go to that new route, which should be a form. So if we look at student new, this is simply a form, nothing too glamorous, but we should be able to enter in some information. And once we hit submit, that's going to submit a post request back to that very same route. We'll see that in a second. Jesse, question. Not sure if you muted, Jesse.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Isn't there supposed to be like a CRSV or some type of tag with the form?
Jesse, you are a lifesaver. That was accidental that I forgot it, but it is also honest. I forget it half the time. We do need a CSRF token. Thank you so much. And again, the fact that you guys are catching these mistakes makes me more confident that you guys understand Django. And hopefully I understand it too. So yes, we do need a CSRF token. If we did not have that, we'll get an error, which we could probably see in a second. Jenny Lee, you have a question, comment?
Just a quick question about the method. Is it necessary to put post in all caps?
No, you can put this in lowercase too. I like having it in caps just to make it easier to see, but good comments. Must provide this for Django's sake. So again, inside our form, we need to provide a CSRF token. So please make sure you don't.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to add real quick. Post is a pretty common in generic world in like computing and development, you know, like blog posts and whatever. So to avoid ambiguity, a lot of times for the HTTP methods, we'll write it in all caps. So that's kind of one advantage to writing it that way. You know, the browser doesn't demand you do it, but a lot of people will find it easier to read if you do that. So that's probably why it was like that to begin with.
Thank you, Raphael. And in fact, echoing off that, your challenge from tonight has an object called post as opposed to the post method. So yeah, definitely can get some ambiguity there with a kind of generic word there. But yeah, either case matching works. I want to say, I'm not sure, you probably put any case you want. So I do like that. I want to say that could work, but I'm not going to be that terrible today. All right, so we have our form, CSRF token. Thank you to Jesse. We need this, else we'll see an error. But let's actually see if our wires connect. So we have our new route, which is student create, that will navigate to this location. We have our view handler that's going to simply show our form. And then we have our template that should have the form on it. So let's see if I go to student details. Let's go to our homepage. Okay, so we go to all students. Notice I have a button now. That's the link I provided to create a new student. That should take me to that new route. Hopefully I haven't miswired anything. So I click on that. There we go. So this form, the alignment's terrible, yes, but we have the ability to enter a new student. So let's say our new student is Tori Smith. I guess we're not using last names. ID, I don't know, 7777. I assume she's going to be 25 also because everyone else is. Password's going to be helmets or bike. So again, we're getting these dots here because we specified, just a little tidbit here, if you specify type of password for your input, it's going to give you that automatic functionality. So you can't actually see what password I'm typing in here. So it gives some security, but it's still going to be text on the other side of this. All right, so this is our form. When I hit add student, what is going to happen here? Well, as we mentioned before, we hit the submit button, right? That's going to submit a post request, but where is that going to go? Right now, by default, it's actually going to go back to the same page that we're on. So we're on student/new. We need a post request sent to this very route. Now that's going to be a small issue right now because right now we only have a get request implemented. By default, when you go to a route, you're doing a get request. So if I look at my views, notice here, I'm just showing my page. This is what I expect when we have a get request to this view. This view handler is going to be, all right, this is what I'm going to show you on your get request. Notice we've not specified anything about a get request here. That's just the default method that we are assuming. Joseph, I think you have a question.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, so for that password, if we add, or if we put show in where it says type, it's going to show us that. But how do we add the eyeball where the user can see or select whether they want it to be a show type or a password type?
Yeah, that might be more advanced functionality. I'm not sure if HTML5 has controls like that, but I bet Bootstrap probably has a show hide functionality. That's a little outside of our scope right now, but that is a cool feature to add. But yeah, you probably do it with CSS also, I bet, but many ways to do it. Not going to worry about that right now. I just wanted to show that, we can make this text. It's not going to be a big deal. Oops. This is a keyword. Password is a keyword, has nothing to do with my name here, to be clear. But if we change that, whatever. Tori, ID, whatever we were, 25. Password is what? All right. So right now, when I hit add student, I'm going to hit it. Let's see what happens. All right, cool. Something happened or nothing happened. I'm not sure. I'm back on the same page, which is okay. But the question is, did that new student actually get added? So if I actually go back to my students list, no. Notice that Tori is not added to my list. The reason is we submitted that form. We got data sent to our view handler, but we didn't do anything with it. So that is where we need to add some more logic. So if I go back to new students, let's go Tori, whatever, 25, orange. All right, so when I hit this, we're sending a post request. We need to specify this on our view handler. So the issue here is this view handler is processing any type of request and always responding in the same manner. But in this case, we want to do something a little different. So our get request should be this. This is our get request. But if we get a post request, we want to do something different. Like we're getting in data, we want to process the data, probably add add the new record to our data set, and then maybe redirect somewhere else. We don't want to keep them on the form. That's probably not what we expect. So for our post request, we need to check the actual request object. And this is where that request object becomes useful. Notice we're not using our request object pretty much anywhere here. We're just passing it to our render. But our request object has a wealth of information in it. One of those is the method type. So remember, we specified we're sending a post request method. So we could check if this is equal to post. So now I'm checking, all right, that method, is that equal to post? If it is, I want to do something a little different here. And that different thing is, well, now I have access to this request.post dictionary. So let's actually print that out to see what it looks like. And then let's, that'll be fine for now. Okay, so let's try this again, hit add student. All right, so nothing happened still, but let's look at our, will it be in here? If I do that again, sorry, whatever. All right, so, oh, I think this might matter. So I think this might need to be post. Let's try that again. Tory, IP, orange. Okay, it's down here. So case here seems to matter. So notice when we resend the post request, we did lowercase, but it looks like that this is standardized to be all caps. Again, I would need to double check that, but it seems like it was not working before. But notice now I get this dictionary that has all the fields that I entered. Notice it has the CSRF middleware token. That's what the CSRF token is adding in. I'm not going to worry about that. I don't care about what this is. Notice I have a name field with Tory, because that's what we entered in. I have an ID field in this dictionary with an ID. I have the age, which is really old apparently, and the password that I entered here. So we have access to the data that the user entered in through this request.post dictionary. This is provided on our request when we have a post method. So now I could leverage that. Let's say input data. We are running close to lunchtime, so let's get this. Let's get this completed. So input data is going to be, I want a name, and that's going to be request.post. Again, that's a dictionary, so I'm going to access this by name. Again, this value is coming from this name. Whatever I put into the field name here, that is the exact value I need to use to extract the value out on the other side. So if I called it name here, I'm calling it name here too. That's where that syncing happens. This is my choice. But in this case, I want this to match something else. In this case, I want it to match my models here. So I want to match name, age, password, and role, or what I want to match here. I feel like I'm probably going a little quickly here. I apologize. If there's any questions, definitely stop me. But I want to, again, complete this example. So let's do this in the next 5 minutes, hopefully. All right, so we want to extract the name from that dictionary. Also want the age. We probably want the ID. This is where, again, the naming matters. So I think school ID is what we call it in our class. So I want to match that name exactly. And in this case, we called it ID. So this value is coming from the form. This value I'm trying to match for my class init method. So maybe a comment might help. Key equals the class parameter name, and the value equals the form name attribute. All right, age, and we had one more, which was password. Request.post password. And then we also had a role, right? We're going to hard code the role in. We're not going to allow the user to enter that, but I'm going to specify that here. Student is going to be the role for the student we're creating. Great. Now that I have this dictionary, we can easily create an instance of our students. So I do students. Let's call it new students. It's going to equal our student class. I'm going to create an instance of it. I'm going to use those keyword arguments, input data. So this is a little bit of magic. We're doing ** input data. Since we have a dictionary here that has the exact parameter names that our init method requires, we could simply use the ** operator. That's going to give us keyword arguments to our student init method. I got this yellow squiggly because I have not included student here. So we need to include the student class from our models. That's where we have it stored. All right, so we create a new student instance right here. And then maybe you want to call student dot add students. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to implement the CSV writing. Hopefully you guys are comfortable enough with writing in a new student record. But I do want to append my school dot, we should call this. All right, so my school is an instance of a school. Let's add in this method quickly. Go to models, find my school class. There you are. Let's add one more method here. Def add students. Self is a first parameter. New student is what I'm going to pass here. All I want to do here is do self.students.append and add that new students into my record keeping. Again, the part I am not going to do, but we should do, to do add CSV file updating. So it's not going to persist between, if I take down my server, I'm not going to get that new student back, but you guys can, I guess you guys should be able to write a method to update your CSV file. It's just not the most fun thing to do right now. But the important thing is we update our internal data, so that when we render a list of students page, it's going to have that new students incorporated, because self.students, if you remember, is used in our view handlers right over here, right? So that students list is what we're updating when we call add student. Now, the last thing we want to do here, maybe put some comments here. So we're grabbing the user inputs from the form. Right, so that's how we get the data from this dictionary and then store it into our temporary data set here. Then we want to create a new student instance. Then we want to update our internal and external data. Sorry for putting too much time into comments, but we want to make sure we know what each step is doing. Finally, we want to maybe redirect to the students list page, right? So once they add a new student, we want to redirect them to the entire, let's go to the student detail page because they kind of want to see details on that student. So how do we accomplish this? So important thing here in our post request, which is all this logic, we don't want to just go back to the student new page. That's going to be that form that we're filling out. So that's when we do a get request, we show them the form. When they submit a post request, meaning they submit the form, let's redirect to somewhere else. We're going to return, redirect, reverse. This is Djangoisms, so probably a new syntax, but kind of look it up if you're confused. Redirect is a method that we need to include here. So redirect, render, and reverse, a lot of R's. Reverse lets us pass in a route name and it'll do the rest for us. So here I'm going to say, what's our route name we want to go to? That route name was called student detail. Again, I'm matching this name to the name route that I gave it right here. So again, having names for your routes makes it really easy to kind of call them. Instead of calling the URL, I can just say, hey, what's our route name to call? So student detail is what I called it here. That is the route I want to redirect to. So that's why I'm calling reverse student detail args. So I want to specify what arguments do I need to pass the student to that route. So if I look at student detail up here, I need to pass a student ID as an argument, right? So I want to show a specific student. So that's what arg is going to specify. I'm going to say my new student dot ID or school ID, excuse me. Right. So when the user entered in the information, they provided a school ID. We created a new student that's going to have a school ID parameter set based on whatever value that was. And then that's the new value we're going to pass to our student detail view. A lot of wires here. I'm not going to, sit here and say, this should be kind of clear cut. A lot of things we're connecting here. So we're calling a different view and saying, hey, this is the data that you need. The redirect will handle kind of the redirection for us. That's a Django function. Okay, so again, we grab user input, create an instance of a student, store the student instance, and then redirect to that student detail page for that new student. A lot of steps there. Let's see if this actually works. I'm betting I screwed something up because I know myself pretty well. All right, so we go back to our homepage, all students, new student. All right, we're going to fill out our form. So our get request returned this page to us. because we went to that location and the default method is get. Let's enter Tori. ID will be 7777. She's 25. Orange is a password. So when I click on add student, this may work. This will probably blow up, but let's see. All right, cool. So value after star must be an interval, not int. Oh, I know. So this is a very, very small subtle thing. Here, anyone know the error here? I want to see if we got any smarties in the audience here. Okay, so
Would be star args instead of args since you're passing a parameter list.
Maybe.
Never mind.
No, so we do need to pass a list here. And what's happening here is, since I only have one value, it does not think this is a list or a tuple. The magic, I need to put a comma here, and that tells it this is a tuple and not just a value. So quick detour. X equals something. This is going to set X to equal the string something. If I want to create a tuple, the syntax, since I only have one value here, is Y equals something with a comma. This creates a tuple. So we use round parentheses here to specify a tuple. Here, the round parentheses just mean parentheses. It's just a group. So make sure you understand that. That's what I forgot here. So I want to provide.
Does it have to be a tuple, or could you put it in brackets also?
That's a good question. We can try lists. I guess that. So if we do a list, we don't need that comma because square brackets have a specific meaning. Let's see if that works. So go back here. Let's do this again. There we go. So yeah, it looks like list works. I guess I've always seen them as tuples. There we go. Tori got created. Student, her ID was 777, age and password. Cool. So now the student exists in my internal data. Again, the step I've omitted was writing it out to the file. So if I can reboot my application, Tori will no longer exist in my data. But again, if I go back to all students, notice that Tori is now a student that's in my records. I know that was a lot to take in. Again, this was meant to be a review, but we wanted to cover forms and adding data because we're going to be doing that more ahead. So we're going to get a little bit of practice with your challenge tonight. Before we get to looking over the challenges, any questions about kind of the madness we did here? So we go to our curriculum page, we have our form that we created, and then kind of how we handle the post request. We check the method and then proceed to do something different if we get a post instead of a get. What questions do you guys have?
Ankur, you're gonna put this up, like this video up this afternoon, right?
Video will be posted. I'll submit a pull request to the school roster challenge, and then yeah, those two things will be done.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Is that, Kat, can I ask, was that an indication that this was a little confusing at the end?
I just need to like watch it again, slow and kind of. I got a little lost. I was trying to follow along, and I didn't. But so I want to go through and watch it again and just kind of slow it down.
Again, I'll take the hit on that. I definitely sped up a bit there. I know this is sort of new content of handling form data. We saw this last week in HTML week, but just understanding the flow of capturing data, creating an instance, adding internal data, and then redirecting if you want. That's a more Django specific thing. But again, this is how we created data. There's also functionality if you want to update or delete. We need to add some logic for that. Again, this is just an intro. We're going to be doing CRUD operations a lot more in our second Django week that's ahead. So this is just to kind of dip your toes in the pool, if you want to say. All right, any other questions out there? Okay.
Hey, Ankur, actually, I just want to show one thing real quick. Could you go to the new student form in your browser?
New student form in my browser. Yep.
Yeah, just all the inputs and whatnot. So I think there was some question earlier about what the label element is for, like what it actually does. I got the mobile view. So what the label element does when you have it naming an input is you can click on that label and it counts as a click on the input.
What do you mean by click? Like, does it go to the input field or should it?
Or you have the label and the name set up correctly. That's supposed to be what it does.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah,
it's mostly for it's mostly for checkboxes, honestly, because checkboxes are just really hard to click on by default. I'm not sure what's not working here, but yeah, it's for accessibility is the purpose.
Gotcha. Yeah. So again, you know, we kind of linked it up with this for parameter. I think Raphael's right. For checkboxes, you would have like just a square button for the actual checkbox, but then you want some description for it. And I think that's going to be handy for that. All right, thank you, Raphael. All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to stop